The idea that a wise owl is present and acting in agency by, to use the words of Pope Carl, impinging on the child's trauma. He says impinging on the persona's experience. He also says the persona will perform for them. The idea that there's a wise owl intoning from its parchments what fascinates them as moral testing of a brainwashed child in an environment of deliberate miseducation is the idea that there is such a presence behind phenomenon is enriched by the many examples. Perhaps this talk can be a reference point as other examples are remembered. These sorts of ideas are the sort of things that come to mind but then disappear into the ether. And they're hard to, even though they're recurrent wallflowers, they're hard to collect into a comprehensive guidebook because of how elusive remembering them is. I can't write things down very well anymore because of Parkinson's. But a few examples do come to mind. For example, when I did a palm print in first or second grade at Whiteman School, maybe kindergarten, they used a dye that was dark. My sister may still have it. And when they poured it, it didn't seem to me to be the right color. Now, this was a superimposition that had no racial connotations. As you recall, perhaps, my first greeting to the world was Nathan, the black man at the Ruskin. And I was delighted when the second time I saw him, he looked at me with study of concern about me. I was taken aback. But it was Whiteman School, so there's no doubt a presence of mind impinging. You know, Ralph Proctor has talked about the way that egos of black children are slaughtered or used to be slaughtered by the Pittsburgh public school system. He probably wouldn't object that a white boy got it, but he knows what I'm talking about. Like I did a beautiful dog. Mrs. Silverman said, "Oh, I was delighted with it." She smashed its nose, pulled its ears, flattened its back, and put about 8 or 9 holes in it. Said it's supposed to be a pencil sharpener. I thought I had no talent. It was ghastly. I kept it for years, but I put it away. It wasn't even worth the paperweight. It was so sad for me. Another example is when the Ford brothers took me to get my Social Security card. I didn't notice that it begins 1984, or that my father's name and the letters 1984 appear in the opening of the original film. But Ford would steal things, and I would recoil. I would sit frozen in fear of violating my own character. Vans gave me a quarter once instead of a nickel, and I told everybody till Daddy made me take it back, and I cried. I didn't understand. It was a test. I don't think that they had anything redemptive in mind in looking at me that way. Brecker came over to my house and stole all my grandfather's coin collection. I was aghast. He wanted to get into a physical struggle with me over them. He stole them. right before my eyes. Never would I have done that to somebody. Todd hit me with slaughtering blows. Well, this isn't about violence, but they tortured me into behavioral modification. And I understood that they were doing a study in appeasement. That was one of the earliest indications. Flash of intuition, Penis Gabriel hums on one of his records. It helps you excel. So, well, they were selling the subconscious mind of the queer bit held in custody. The scream behind the scream. And Louis Lapham intoned, "What became of the president's senses?" You see, they saw me as an apparition of presidency. Jimmy C. from Bush's ship in the Navy. And for human rights, he will be robbed of all financing. They put a C for copyright in a Star of David. And Ripper murdered Shannon Harps over a penny. And this is the theme of McCartney's redemption by the fiddlers on the smokestacks of Sobibor. The road to King's heavenly estate where they gassed little Jimmy. The pitmen, the quarrymen. And they had a theme story going with the face behind the face inner sanctum of media, where they unfolded how it's going to go. Don't you realize we found the papers? It was an intercept, they hum. Yada yappy that. He threatened. He was scared to death. He never touched Leslie Katz, and suddenly she was rejecting him and making a mockery of him. He who had been tortured and suffered from a nerve agent. They said, oh, he was suffering from a nerve agent, man. That shows he deserved it because he could have saved John Lennon. He was abstracted. What became of the president's senses? And they had this girl rubbing her virginity in my face, and Flip comes pirouetting with his Senegalese decoitery, saying, could have saved John Lennon means virginity is rape. Ha 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 ha. And it was all a Houdini. It was all set up. But you have people showing their affinity to the narrative. Dancing on thin ice, Japan being promoted to third place in victory of the third cosmopolitan war, at the bonfire of the vanities, the perfect storm in Kuwait. I mean, they stage managed it. These oligarchs are maniacs. They used grocery stores. They had The Eagle's Gift by Carlos Castaneda, because they were playing a game with the collective mind. People are going to believe could have saved John Lennon, but was hunting a virgin. That's what they're going to believe. That it's encrypted, I'll show you something. Maybe I've shown you this before. I'm showing you it again, but this is an example of what I have found. This isn't comprehensive. Take a look at my paintings while I'm away. The reason I'm doing this, friends, is because I care. I've been doing this a long time for people who have no remorse about threatening me and poisoning me to the tune of this narrative they have planned. The FBI Federal Bureau of Investigation can't do a lickety spit of homework. I've had to tell them this thousands of times. At the top, you have Two Virgins by John Lennon. That's where the idea comes from, it's John Lennon. The second, you have a romp scene, and she goes, that's one. And then you have, notice the crimson lake of fire coming from the girl's thighs, which forms the map of Japan. Virginity, the symbol of, well, you get the idea. And number one, Kung Fu, episode one, volume one, season one, has will know you're alive. This is a central theme throughout the entire war game. The entire war game works this way. And it feedbacks and bounces through zillions of their Confederate operations. Here's an example. Two completely different films. Notice they spotlight the number two. One of them is over a girl receiving mail. Two. Two virgins. See, they use the C in the Star of David, the symbol of decency. That's the one I was talking about. And they ran a mousetrap on Mount Desert Island, a Hitler mousetrap on Mount Desert Island. While Maduro Goto was protesting John Lennon over the assassin of a virgin. So they commit the crime, and then they protest the crime that they committed. Notice it says broken science. The script says broken science. I mean, I have plenty of organized representations of what they did. So how is you get this idea laughing? I'd like to laugh and brought to the doc to explain where he gets the idea that any of this had to do with me losing my senses. This comes from semiotics and cinema from before I was born. They produced me eugenically. I'll show you something. It's really nauseating because the family story was Mingo Win saying I was framing Reagan. Oh, I'll show you something. The NAACP jump and holler and claim the caller that I was framing the Gipper. This article proves that I was not framing Reagan. It's before I knew what was going on. The attitude of the public tends to enforce the attitude that nothing can be done. Shadowboxing against the stereotypes of their imagination, which discourage any effort to confront the problem within the context of the system. I said the moral breakdown comes from the Reagan's culture of strength worship. and is interested in undermining other people's right to take themselves seriously. Many skinheads are trying to dissociate themselves from Nazi punks. And these people who I was protesting, I said, were writing death to Reagan on bridges. So it was clear I was trying to protect Reagan from what I thought was the monsters from the id that he was conjuring, who weren't afraid to threaten him. That's protective of the president. Little did I know what a rotten, sticking SOB he really was. I learned that he needed as an alibi to justify torturing me, the claim that I was framing him. That's something I learned. That's not something I set out to do. And they were like, well, we dare you to say it, queerball. We dare you to say it. We know where this leads, queerball. We dare you to say it. And they had this ace up their sleeve. Trump could have saved John Lennon, queerball. He was like this. Remember the guy who worked at Mandela Books, who was in car sickness, who was like this with Frippy Toon? I gave Fripp's address to him. We don't know how it got into the hands of Robert Card. No. Blue has Robert's card. John Lennon was like this with Reagan. Ringo says, vroom, bikers come from Hustler magazine. Ringo Starr is going to fix your wagon. We know what you should be thinking now, queerbait. You should be thinking that you wanted some, and so you deserve to die. And it had this +1 signifier. It was all set up, that is, except for Mary, she stopped me halfway. I said, do you want me to continue? And she said, no, please pull out. So I did. And they said, that's +1. And they came after me with syringes, and they surrounded my name with positive and negative signs. Neurohypnosis. From the mighty bandwagon of military psychiatry behind the attack. Queerball, are you going to dare say something like that? He was implying that, and we conjured what he was implying from Radio KKK at CMU Drama Club. We saw into his psyche and conjured. And Swami Nostra came with Penis Gabriel and said, we'll make the gays feel better by blowing up this, by blowing up that. But we are as one with Crowhag Reguster. We are as one with Yoko Ono. Because she is the one who truly represents the victims, with Jeffman, the Zionist, of course, the symbol of decency with the C and the Star of David. Only virgins are allowed to make pennies. Only virgins can have a penny. All the other people have wasted themselves, have wasted their lives, have wasted their chances, and Flame Over Africa is going to boil them in a pot. That's what Kaisa Dawes said, boil them in a pot.